So resort reefs, we got resorts, and every morning before the guests wake up, they're sweeping up the dead leaves, tidying up the garden, making it all look really nice before guests wake up. At the end of the day, the beach is cleaned up, any rubbish is picked up, even picking up the seaweed, getting it all nice and tidy. But below the waterline, things are not looking anywhere near as good. We've got trash moving around. It's looking a mess. We've got rags and plastic wrapping around coral and killing it. And there's wear and tear. Nothing tends to happen. We've got sticks rolling around, bashing corals. You're probably familiar with the crown of thorns starfish, which can chew through a lot of coral in a day. They're basically just left to do their thing. Hence we came up with Reef CPR, so Reef First Aid. And Reef CPR stands for Coral Preservation and Restoration. But also the C, the P, and the R stand for 3 priority actions. Reef CPR, we've got the C stands for control and stop actions that are causing reef damage. So the C is for control and stop actions that are causing the damage. Then you move on to this. Once you've done that, you move on to your second priority, which is P, and that's prepare substrate and conditions for maximum recovery, because nature will naturally recover by itself fairly quickly. Nature doesn't leave anything alone. It doesn't waste space. So if you prepare the site for maximum recovery, you've got a good chance that it will recover. And then third and last is your R, which is replanting corals, so an assisted recovery program. So once you've taken control of the actions that are causing the damage, you've prepared the substrate for recovery, you can also accelerate the process by replanting corals, and we're going to go over that a bit more detail. So the purpose of Reef CPR is to provide recreational divers, dive centers, resorts, as well as conservation NGOs and local communities with simple yet effective strategies to maintain and restore the health of their coral reef sites. Traditional CPR is conducted in an emergency, and Reef CPR can be thought of in the same way, life-saving steps that can help stabilize and preserve ailing reefs. The key message of Reef CPR is that our marine playgrounds need ongoing care and maintenance, just like our land-based ones do. Let's talk about some threats to corals. Temperature, which I'm sure you're all well aware of with talking of global warming and bleaching on the Great Barrier Reef. Physical damage, needless to say, there's a range of physical impacts that can happen. So it's about education, and that's where, as trained in Reef CPR, one of the roles is educating people on that corals aren't rocks and you can't just stand on them. Predation, we spoke about the crown of thorns, the cots, picture on the left there, very ugly critter. And there's Drupella, not such a good clear photo, but on the right-hand side is the snail. There's a snail that can get into plague proportions, especially when predators have been taken away. Natural predators for the snail are taken away. Coral doesn't like sediment, but sediment gets stirred up for various reasons. It might be just natural tidal cycle, storm waves. We have to deal with dredge plumes when you're dredging. There's a big plume that's generated and sediment lands on corals, and they can only tolerate sediment for a certain amount of time. So in this photo here, which you might not be able to see very clearly, there's a bunch of sand trapped in the mucus, and the coral pushes it, moves it with its little tentacles to the edge of the coral and lets it float away. Now that takes some energy, so they can only do it for so long, and they also need sunlight. So the longer the sediment's sitting on there, they're not getting sunlight and they're having to expend energy to get rid of the sediment. So eventually it wears them down and can kill them. Algae, seaweeds, which we've spoken a bit about, because seaweeds, just like weeds in your garden, they grow quick. If coral area becomes dead, seaweed quickly moves in, especially if there isn't any predators of the seaweed. We've got pollutants such as oils, pesticides, heavy metals, anti-fouling compounds, nutrients. Nutrients are a big problem. There's a list in red of the compounds that you need to check We don't mess with corals that are diseased. The last thing we want to be doing is moving them and putting them into a place that doesn't have coral disease. Create jobs for yourselves, basically, and stop drumming up support and getting permits or kicking it off.